The first one happened in 1999 in a place called Yasuní in Ecuador, my country. 1 square kilometer in Yasuní has more biodiversity than the totality of the United States and Canada combined. It is considered the most diverse place in the world. I was president of Ecuador at that time and decided to protect that region from any kind of damage. Thank you. Thank you. So we created a concept that converted the Yasuní section in an intangible area. It was not a park, just a park. It was not a protected zone. This concept of intangibility was new to the world. Second, we said, well, we are not exploiting oil here. We are keeping the trees where they are. So we are selling oxygen to the world. And we would like to receive some compensation from developing countries because of this contribution we are doing. And we started a project to do that. That was another pioneer idea in the world. And third, we decided to ban any extractive activity in the zone, and only ecological tourism would be allowed there. And all that was going to be managed by the public sector, the government, and the local communities living there. So in those three aspects, the idea, the intangibility, the selling of the oxygen, and the process of managing the park, the area were very innovative. The consequence, the World Wild Fund gave to the government of Ecuador the Gift to the Earth Award for this action that was inspired by Yolanda Cacabatze, Minister of Environmental Issues. This is Act 1. Act 2 happened in 2006 under the government of President Rafael Correa. Oil was discovered in that zone. The price of oil went to the sky, and he declared that poverty in the country was happening now, and we should not keep those resources for the future. And he decided to start extracting oil from that place, saying that with new technologies, you could come only to the limit of the park, and through subterranean pipes, you could extract the oil without affecting the surface. When you start doing that, you open roads, you bring people, they need where to live, they need where to eat, they need where to entertain, and you destroy the zone, of course. Not because you are doing things, but because you are allowing them to come to places where it was not possible before. So oil produced three contaminations. The contamination of the original idea, this sanctuary was desecrated. Second, the contamination of the physical reality. And third, the contamination of the idea of working together with local communities. There were groups of nomads in that zone that were not contacted by people that were not from there. So that was the richness of the situation. The consequence, the production of oil in that part became a big, important income for the national government. So new, different, important interests started to play roles there. And then we come to the third act that happened last year, 2023. When the government started exploiting oil, a group of citizens presented a petition for a plebiscite. We wanted the people of Ecuador decide if they would like to protect the region or to extract oil, and never was processed. But last year, the Constitutional Tribunal took the dust off that petition and presented that for public decision. Very old question, more than a decade old, different circumstances in the world. And on top of that, they put this question to be voted the same day that we had general elections for the presidency, the vice presidency, and Congress. So this vital, important theme in the world was just one more part of the electoral campaign and had a very low level of analysis and discussion. And as we know in the world today, you can take for you years getting your education at universities, getting your master's degrees. Congratulations, Margaret, for your second degree, and getting your PhDs, years of study. But you can have the feeling of becoming an expert on any field in the world with 20 hours in social networks. So that became a vast ocean of information with 10 centimeters of profundity. And the people of Ecuador went and voted there. I would like to ask you to think how you should have voted in that moment. Because at that moment, oil prices were down. The oil production of the whole country, including in these fields, were down. Social programs to combat poverty, etc., were financed with those resources. So you had to choose between keeping the oil there and increasing the social conflict, or getting some money and destroying nature for solving this problem. Okay, now, the debate was between the protectionists that said ban everything, period, and the extractionists that said, no, 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 with modern techniques and systems and methods, you can control. You can make damage control, so you can get both. Between those that said, if you lose those primary forests, etc., you will never recover them, and those that said, you have to pay that price for development. Between those that said, you can compensate the money you are losing for not extracting oil, and those that said, you will never can get that. Okay, what is my conclusion, my personal conclusion? It was very hard for me, as for any other person that has served the country or the city or the county from a public position. You have to choose between two difficult, tyrannic options, and you have to sacrifice one of those in the service of others. We all have had that kind of decisions. So my first conclusion was, in personal terms, I am not in politics anymore since many years ago, to preserve biodiversity is a need, and it is impossible to debate that or to argue against that. So that is true. The first part of the phrase is real and true. Preservation has a value in its own. To compensate for the loss of the income with other means is a wishful thinking. In the state of the situation in the world right now, it is not possible to do that. And now, Let me just show you a very brief comparison that will illustrate this point. I do that with a lot of respect because I am surrounded by experts here in this panel about these issues. I, after a lot of efforts, could graduate as a lawyer. So all these things are not my field. First thing, remember those times when you had to produce something to be next to the source of energy. You need to be next to the river because the mill was moved by the water of the river, or the windmill. So you had to bring the wheat there to be milled. Then we had in the history of humankind the Industrial Revolution, produced by the steam engine that changed everything, and international transport. So before we were using coal and then oil to produce energy, and we had to create a whole complex of connections from the moment you generate energy, let's say hydroelectric power, then you have to lower to make it possible to be transported to the houses, connected to the houses, and to allow you to press the button of the dishwasher to work. So a whole system of production and a grid to distribute that. And we were working with that, and came the problem of global warming. And the idea is you cannot get oil anymore as a good fuel. You have to substitute that, if possible, with electric energy, basically, or wind power, etc. Now, what were the advantages of oil? We can blame oil from many different points of view. But what are the merits of this source of energy? First, when you want to compare an barrel of oil, with a unit in wind power or a unit in electric power, you have to compare them. Otherwise, how can you measure apples with pears? So the caloric capacity of oil is enormous. Second, the price for doing that is rather cheap. It has ups and downs, but it's a price that the economy in the world is accustomed to pay. Third, the technology for extracting oil is called mature. It has been developed along many years. Four, you can get oil in many different places in the world. It's very ubiquitous. Then, as Director Chao was mentioning, that you can call Taiwan and say, produce these chips that we need immediately, and you can do it. The energy, in the case of oil or hydroelectric plants, you can get that on demand. You need more energy for tonight, you increase the production, you can control that. So it is easy to produce, and it is very easy to distribute. And you don't have to store it. Then we are planning now to do that same thing with electricity. What I think would be the good news and the bad news about that? The first one, yes, to produce energy, solar energy, is cheap. Actually, if you compare the caloric capacity of oil and solar, it is the equivalent of a barrel of oil at $34. And the oil is usually higher than that, so it's a very good business. Second, the technology is very mature as well. That's good news. Third, You cannot do that in as many places as you have in the world producing oil. You need to be in the right locations to get solar power. Then you cannot get that on demand. It is intermittent. It doesn't work at night. So how do you overcome that obstacle? You can store it. But here starts the bad news. I remember this man falling down from the top of the Empire State Building, and when he was going through the 5th floor, somebody on the window said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "So far, so good." So far, so good, yes. But you can store with enormous investment in lithium batteries. And the price is enormous. And then you have the grid, which is not good now, but it is organized to get the energy from the hydroelectric plants or thermal plants that were planted near the grid. Now you have to connect all these solar panels to the grid that is not ready or is not enough. And that does another enormous cost. So if you add these two elements, the price is going to be much higher than the price of barrel of oil. So it is more expensive. And what is something that I think is needed here? We are analyzing decarbonization from the demand side only. We need to cut the emission of these gases. So lower your consumption. All over the world, we do enormous efforts in our countries for doing that. But the whole South America produces 3% of the emissions in the world. And the whole Africa produces 3% of the emissions. And the European Union produces 20-something. And the whole Asia produces 30%, the whole Asia region. And one country produces the same 30%, the United States. So when you're calling the whole world to cut those emissions for the advantage of everybody, never lose from sight this reality. 30, 20-something. There is where you have to work. Second, as far as I know, and I can be wrong, nobody has really calculated the total cost of converting oil energy to green energy. What are the amount of investments that the economy of the world needs to produce this change? Not in rhetorical terms, not in wishful thinking, but in real terms. Nobody has done that. And somebody that tried, I think it was McKinsey, like $3 trillion just to prepare for that, to prepare the enablers of that thing. How much cobalt, lithium, et cetera, you need for batteries, cables, et cetera? How much energy are you going to consume to just produce those things? So we need to be very serious when you talk about these things. We need to distinguish the real problems from the good purposes that we all have about this. Where is the funding for that? If you calculate the amount, where is the funding? Where the funding will come from? What are the financial vehicles to use that? What is the market attitude to that? What will be the new regulations? Can you do that just by using what we have now in our hands? And then we have great opportunities coming with that. Regions in the world that have been considered useless, like the Sahara, or the Atacama Desert in South America, or extends fields in Australia, could be very productive because they are in the right places and have the good luck of a lot of sun energy. And what are we doing to analyze this problem, not only from the demand side, but from the supply side? I don't think we have a real effort to help those regions of the world to produce that. And that is a very concrete sector for cooperation. Then we can use that opportunity, thinking like countries from the underdeveloped world, for example. We need to observe, again, as you said, Director Chao, the chain value. Where can we insert ourselves? Which part would be advantageous? And then we need good luck, and we need smart actions. And I would like to finish highlighting these opportunities. I would like to bring more answers than questions, but I have much more questions than answers, to be realistic and honest with myself today. And maybe just a final thought. Instead of trying to stop the inevitable, why don't we try to be there when this will happen and take some of the benefits for us? Because when a dog is trying to chase rabbits, the dog doesn't follow the rabbit. He makes a calculation, a triangulation, and goes to a place where he will meet the rabbit in the future. That would be a good idea for us to think. What we need to do, where we need to be to get some advantage of this reality. Thank you very much.